recommendations on specific items that we discussed in the course of our conference. And then we'll take a few comments. And once we agree on those main elements, we'll accept that as the main conclusions of the conference. And then we'll adopt them, after which we'll invite the Honorable Minister to deliver the closing address for the conference. I should say that there are many things that have been discussed here in the last 3 days. And we are going to do a report covering all that. That is the background, the ways in which to carry out what we intend to do and all that, and share that online to everybody who has been to this conference. So the conference itself is simply, the recommendations itself is going to be briefly, l'interprétation. Are we getting the interpretation now? Okay, right, thank you. Then the problem is here. The rest are getting it. Are we okay in the other part of the hall? Okay, the technicians will help you there. So what I was saying is that there are many things we've discussed in this meeting, all of which will be embodied in a report that will be circulated to everybody who took part in this conference. In terms of the conclusions, we are simply going to adopt recommendations, especially relating to what we can do ourselves after this conference. I remember that yesterday in the discussions, I think on the first day, one major contributor alluded to some conference decisions of 1963, and which were very pertinent today. It was as if some of the issues that we're discussing today were being discussed back there 50 years or so ago. Partly, I think the problem with conclusions is that if you make conclusions relating to things that you cannot yourself do, then after the meeting, your paper just lies somewhere. So we want to focus our conclusions or recommendations more on the kind of things that we can do as follow-up, whether as trade union educators, whether as trade union leaders, whether as employers or members of government, or solidarity partners, or Pan-Africanists, as we have been in this meeting. So without much ado, I would like to invite our coordinator, Joel, to read to us the draft conclusions for our meeting. Joel.
Thank you, Comrade Kwasi. I will just skip a bit of the background to say we participating organizations and structures within the Pan-African Education Program, as well as other trade unions from different countries, employers and government that have joined us, and of course, our hosts and collaborating organization in Rwanda, the Rwandan Governance Board and the Rwandan government. We have all converged here from since 28 to today, and have agreed to chart a way forward with the following conclusions. On the question of citizens' participation in democracy and governance, we say we shall continue to demand political education and mobilization so as to prevent the continuous and easy manipulation of our people. Issues of, we equally say we shall continue to work to ensure that spaces for the promotion of civil liberties, particularly the issue on association, assembly, freedom to express one's view, are promoted, are secured. We shall commit to work with other civil society organizations in our quest to deepen and expand the political spaces and to collaborate to defeat threats to genuine citizens' participation. For us as trade unions also, we shall also continue to prevent and campaign for the establishment for the establishment of an African independent electoral commission. Of course, so you know where that issue is coming from when we talked about what election mean, the cost of election, and the fairness thereof. We continue to affirm the usefulness of multi-party democracy as a vehicle for advancing our citizens' participation. To our government, we urge them to abide by people-centered governance practices. On the question of effective peace and stability, we have noted that the diverse issues of sectarian violence, the prevalence thereof, and the current manifestation around terrorism that accentuate other forms of violence are on the increase. We conclude to say we shall do the following. We call on our government to assure security of livelihoods and social existence, as well as respect the full spectrum of individual and collective human and social rights. We also call on our government to continue to fashion and implement broad-based youth employment policies. If we say that our youth are easily mobilized for violence, then the question of how we need to engage them productively. We shall continue to call on our government to firm up collaborative and comprehensive security initiatives. In this context, we note and we commend the current African Union mobilization of its military standby force. Trade union organizations shall continue to push for inclusive dialogue in a way that we connect to the existing initiative within different government platforms, the African Union, national government, and regional economic groupings. On the issue of economic transformation, we noted that our history shows that one of the surest ways we can attain prosperity is through industrialization. Therefore, our focus should be on how we can achieve manufacturing competence through the effective mobilization of our mineral, material, and human wealth. To this end, we call on our governments at different levels to continue the industrialization, to continue to hold on to prioritize and hold on to the industrialization as the fulcrum of our economic transformation agenda. In other words, it is non-negotiable. That should be at the heart of how we want to progress. This will mean that African economies keep faith with existing national action plans, like we said in 1963. Thereafter, the Lagos Action Plan was one of such a plan that was developed from that 1963 conclusions, as well as the current African Union Agenda 2063 that clearly accentuates industrialization. And of course, in doing this, we said it means we are moving against the current practice where our economies is primarily produce driven. We must manufacture. We must produce finished goods. We must add value. Also, we noted, importantly, we know that our continent has never been short of industrialization plans. We therefore call on our different government structures to commit to genuine, consistent, and sustainable implementation agenda. We also call for the reorientation of our national education policies and curriculum to concentrate and accentuate our national development priorities. Our government must be encouraged and engaged to aggressively invest in education and training, as well as devote sufficient attention and allocate resources to research and development. infrastructure development as one of the pins to achieving economic transformation. We call on our government at all levels, national, regional, and continental, especially the NEPAD, to continue to collaborate in the development of infrastructures to facilitate social and economic integration and mobility. We will continue to engage our governments as trade unions on the urgency to ensure that Africa can farm and feed itself. We will remain vigilant to practices of land grabbing that disconnect our people from their lands and livelihoods. On the issue of corruption, which we said is endemic and part of the symptom of our current development crisis, we ourselves as workers and trade unions organizations, we commit ourselves to be the change we want to see in terms of the fight against corruption. We will continue to work at improving our policies and practices as part of conscious efforts to be better citizens and organizations. We shall continue to support genuine and pro-people fights against corruption within our economies. We call on our government to demonstrate urgent and genuine commitment and political will in the fight against corruption. Public asset declaration is one of such ways. The establishment of well-resourced and independent institutions is another. We will continue to demand that sanction regimes sufficient to discourage corrupt practices should be put in place and enforced. On the question of financing Africa's transformation and ending illicit financial flows, to drive Africa's transformation agenda, it will require aggressive and a consistent mobilization of resources across existing and imaginative means. Alarmed by the fact that Africa is losing a conservative figure of $50 billion every year through illicit financial flow, we reiterate that these financial resources are required to fund the provision of basic public and social services such as healthcare, education, water, sanitation, and sustainable energy. In this regard, we as trade union, we call on our government to seriously and consciously commit to the effective implementation of the Mbeki panel report. This will require them to resist the pressure to resort to competition amongst themselves that leads to the race to the bottom. Strongly urge our government to reform national, regional, and international tax systems and remove counterproductive tax incentives that will lead to substantially increased budget for African countries to finance the sustainable development goals, as well as pay for improved services and other development initiatives. We shall call on our government to continue to pursue and enforce progressive tax administration, especially those that do not put the burden of taxation on the poor. We equally call on our government to take the initiative to ensure that companies doing business pay their fair shares of tax on economic activity that take place within our jurisdiction. We therefore commit as African Trade Union Organization to join, support, and advance the tax justice campaigns at our various economies and locates as efforts to continue to contribute to the quest to end this immoral practice. We shall continue to join regional and global campaigns for the eradication of tax havens. We will continue to join our governments in the demand for a more democratic, participatory, and inclusive global taxation governance. In essence, we strongly support the call for the current UN tax body to be expanded into a global tax governance platform. Committee Chair, those are the points, the conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel. As we listened, I think it's clear that our recommendations are under a number of main headings. One, citizens' participation in democracy and governance. effective peace, security, and stability, economic transformation, infrastructure development, corruption, and then financing Africa's transformation and ending illicit financial flows. Now, I will request that if there is anything, any important recommendation or thing that any of us in the meeting thinks should be done under any of these items that has not been mentioned, that can be raised for consideration in the recommendations. Otherwise, as I indicated, what we are going to do is to adopt these as broad issues around which all of us can work in our different capacities. But then we are going to make a detailed report of this conference that can be used to guide our work actually in practice. Because as we indicated at the beginning, most of the issues here have been discussed over and over before. This is not the first time the issues are being discussed. But the importance of this conference for us is the deeper understanding and insight that some of us gain on the issues and what we do after it, how it impacts on our work, whether as trade union educators, whether as leaders, as civil society activists, or collaborating partners and solidarity organizations. That's, what we do after, how the understanding impacts, is what will be the value added of this conference. So let's hear anybody who thinks there's something burning by way of recommendation that did not come up in the draft that was read out. Under citizen participation in democracy and governance, effective peace, security and stability, economic transformation, infrastructure development, corruption, or financing Africa's transformation and ending illicit financial flows. The floor is open. Yes.
Excellence, Madame le ministre, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du Présidium, je voudrais saluer d'abord la qualité du rapport qui reflète nos débats. Mais je voudrais aussi que ce rapport-là exprime de façon claire et nette certaines préoccupations que j'ai ressenties dans la salle. Nous avons eu à parler de la démocratie et de la gouvernance. Alors, le premier jour, les débats, le thème des débats du premier jour, on s'est demandé, par rapport à la question de la gouvernance, par rapport à la question de la limitation des mandats, si on n'était pas en train de réviser les concepts. La même préoccupation a été partagée hier, aujourd'hui, pas plus tard qu'aujourd'hui. D'ailleurs, on se demande si, en fait, la conférence avait pour objet une banalisation de la limitation des mandats. On n'est pas en train de remettre en cause un principe acquis de haute lutte. Donc la conférence de Kigali, de mon point de vue, n'est pas en train de mettre en place un modèle universel qui consiste à dire en avant la limitation, la fin de la limitation des mandats. Donc je crois que par rapport à ça, les précautions sont nécessaires. Maintenant, la conférence également n'a pas dit qu'il faudrait plutôt des hommes forts. Oui, il faudrait des hommes forts. Mais un homme fort, il est fort par rapport aux valeurs démocratiques auxquelles il adhère. Il est fort par rapport à la qualité de la gouvernance. Il est fort par rapport à sa mission de service public. Donc, lors des débats informels, d'ailleurs, on se dit, mais en fait, on n'a pas besoin de bonnes institutions, on a besoin des hommes forts. Non, un homme est fort par rapport, non pas par rapport à sa capacité de nuisance, par rapport à sa capacité de jouer contre son peuple. Il est fort par rapport à sa capacité de développement. Et je crois que nous a parlé longuement du Premier ministre de Singapour, qui a fait 31 ans au pouvoir. Mais c'était un homme fort. Il est fort parce qu'il adhère, il ne joue pas contre le peuple. Il est fort parce que c'est un développeur. Nous avons connu des hommes forts. Mandela aurait pu, n'est-ce pas, transformer, ne pas limiter le mandat, mais il a dit, je m'en vais. C'est un homme fort, ça. Donc c'est de ces hommes forts-là que l'Afrique a besoin. C'est-à-dire ceux-là qui adhèrent aux valeurs. Et avec tout le bien qu'on dit du système rwandais, du président rwandais, nous voyons que c'est un homme fort. Il est fort parce qu'il ne joue pas contre son peuple. Parce on nous a dit qu'il y a la tolérance zéro à la corruption. Parce qu'il gère bien la diversité. Parce qu'il respecte le genre. Donc c'est de cette qualité-là que l'Afrique a besoin. Donc il voudrait également qu'on ait des réponses claires par rapport à ça. Maintenant, par rapport à la qualité des institutions, je pense que nous avons aussi des débats. On a dit que c'est le système qui doit être fort. Fort par ses règles, fort par les valeurs que cela incarne. Donc je crois qu'à partir de ce moment, nous devons nous accorder. On n'est pas venu ça faire. Moi, je suis du Bénin. Je ne retiens pas que la question de la limitation des mandats n'est pas une question préoccupante. C'est une question préoccupante, c'est acquis de haute lutte. Il n'y a pas de modèle universel. Ceux qui veulent limiter les mandats limitent, ceux qui ne veulent pas limiter ne les limitent pas. Donc, ensuite, je crois que pour ce qui concerne le PANAF, le thème est bien. Mobilisation des Africains pour la transformation de l'Afrique. Mais je vais peut-être suggérer que le prochain thème, ce soit plutôt mobilisation des Africains pour la transformation de leurs leaders. Le poisson pourrit par la tête. Lorsque vous avez un bon leader, tel qu'on a eu dans les pays de la Corée, enfin le Singapour, nous pourrons aller de l'avant. Donc c'était ma suggestion que notre prochain...
Excuse me.
Oui.
We don't intend to reopen the debate again. Please go straight to the recommendations.
Donc c'est en termes de recommandations pour le prochain thème, que ce soit mobilisation des Africains pour la transformation du leadership. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I didn't offer any guidance on the nature of interventions we are looking for. As I indicated in the opening, we've had a long debate and we intend to do a report of this conference. And in fact, my understanding is that that report will even be shared in draft with everybody who took part for a comment before it's finalized. And that's a report that people can work with. What we are looking for now are just succinct recommendations on things that we can do. Term limits was discussed, and as was clear, some people were for it, some people were against it, and the value of it and all was discussed. But we didn't conclude or decide to make any recommendations on term limits. That's not the business of this conference, and in fact, that's not something that you can even implement, even if you make the recommendation. So please, let's focus on the kind of things that we can follow up on the various subheadings that were provided. Areski and then Minister Asandiop, in that order. Areski. And please, no more than a minute, if you can. Honorable Minister.
Merci, Président. Je crois que pendant les discussions, il a été retenu que cette conférence ne devrait pas être une conférence comme les autres et que ses conclusions devraient être portées plus en avant. C'est la raison pour laquelle il doit être recommandé que ces conclusions doivent être portées par l'USA, la CIC Afrique, et le ministre en charge du travail du Rwanda, à la Commission des affaires sociales de l'Union africaine. Et si la tripartite africaine adopte ce que nous venons de dire ici, il serait recommandé que ce soit transmis au chef d'État en janvier. C'est ça que je voulais qu'on retienne comme recommandation. Donc en décembre, on transmet nos conclusions à la Commission sociale de l'Union africaine par Louza, la CIC et le ministre du Travail du Rwanda. Et de là, transmettre au chef d'État en janvier. Merci.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Merci, camarade secrétaire général. Je vais abonder à peu près dans le même sens que notre aîné et son Excellence, Monsieur le ministre de l'État, Hassan Diop. Je pense que c'est la partie justement pratique qui va jouer un rôle important. C'est comment traduire ça dans les faits, dans la réalité, c'est-à-dire de porter la voix de cette conférence aux décideurs. Donc, il s'agit là qu'on se mette d'accord les niveaux, les niveaux d'intervention au niveau national, au niveau sous-régional et au niveau continental. Donc, on s'engage à transmettre toutes ces conclusions. Je propose aussi, parce que nous sommes d'accord sur les questions de principe, la formulation, on peut refaire la formulation, c'est-à-dire qu'on ne va pas essayer maintenant de changer un mot, de trouver, mais la question des principes, c'est retenu donc dans les conclusions, il a présenté tous les principes. Mais la formulation, nous allons travailler en étroite collaboration pour trouver une meilleure forme pour transmettre votre message justement aux décideurs à travers les mécanismes du dialogue social. Je ne sais pas si, par exemple, si on doit, parce que dans les débats, on a insisté sur la question d'accès aux services sociaux de base, qui est une condition sine qua non pour toute politique de changement et de développement. Et si aussi on n'ajoute pas quelque chose sur la question migratoire. Est-ce qu'on ne peut pas ajouter quelque chose sur la problématique migratoire et qui fait partie aussi de... Enfin, c'est une préoccupation de la gouvernance. Et c'est un programme, et c'est aussi un problème qui affecte l'Afrique et demain, ça sera un grand problème. Voilà ce que je vous suggère et merci.
Okay, thank you, Areski. I think the point you make about principles is important. My only caution is that, of course, there are many things that are important for all of us on this continent, but we should be mindful that it's not everything that we can put in. So, for instance, the issue of migration, I'm not sure how we want to deal with that because even though it may have come up in some respects, it didn't form a core part of this, but I think we can pick this up. Wadrago, Ernest. Yeah, Wadrago.
Ok, merci. J'ai juste une petite contribution à donner. À la lumière de tout ce qui a été dit ici, je souhaiterais qu'en pied de page du rapport, que l'on marque que c'est encore possible, juste pour marteler que l'Afrique peut encore aller de l'avant et de tout le temps, ça nous rappellera quelque chose et cette conférence. Merci.
Thank you. I think that can be our final word. D. Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the recommendation on economic transformation, on the last 2 days, a lot of emphasis have been placed on empowerment, economic security. So, and there is no nation that can sustain its economic growth and development or economic transformation without its citizens being at the core. On that note, I'd like to recommend that the phrase that reads, the focus should be placed on industrialization as the fulcrum for economic transformation, that we add focus should be placed on industrialization and empowerment as the fulcrum for economic transformation. Focus should be placed on industrialization and empowerment as the fulcrum for economic transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. To close the list. Check Diop.
Merci, camarade secrétaire général. Je pense que, en droite ligne au thème central, il est question d'une forte mobilisation de tous les segments du continent africain. Dès lors, je pense qu'il y a lieu, dans les recommandations, de demander, nous syndicalistes, une reconnaissance de la revendication comme facteur de progrès. Je le dis parce que la plupart de nos gouvernants pensent, ou bien c'est dans l'esprit, en tout cas dans l'état d'esprit, que la revendication est un moyen de chantage syndical pour négocier. Mais là, il faudrait que tous soient d'accord pour la reconnaissance de la revendication comme facteur de progrès. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Cheikh Diop. Anna.
Thank you, Secretary General. I just wanted to raise the point on the issue of women and youth. We did not get any recommendation. And also on youth and women, access to participation, and also advancing vulnerable groups on exclusion and marginalization. Chair, it would be good to capture the mainstreaming women in everything we are doing, especially in participation in democracy, another thing we talked here yesterday and the other day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think, I won't say that's an omission because it will be an unforgivable one. I think it's the cut and paste, but thank you very much for reminding us. I think it's very central. And it will be important under citizens' participation and democracy as well as economic transformation. Thank you. Brian Kaguru.
Comrade Secretary General, there are two small missing things: time frame, and if this is going to take place, what is the commitment by national unions and civil society when they go back? Otherwise, we're talking at a very stratospheric level. We may perhaps need to return to the soil and mud level.
Thank you very much, Brian. For sure, I think the issue of commitment, especially by participants, whatever constituency they belong in, is clear. We can put that in very clearly. I'm not sure about the time frame though, but we'll have to check. Because if you take citizens' participation and, if you take all the elements, I'm not sure how we could integrate time frame into that. So maybe you want to elaborate, yeah.
If you take a small issue, which is very big, like women's participation, there were issues around specific quotas or percentages, both within the trade unions that are represented here and within the political structures in our countries, and a commitment to ensure that the move towards those continental or national quotas actually does happen. I think what we can do is undertake that by this date, at least the union will have presented the request to member states with a demand or a time frame that it be done ahead of 2017 or something. But there has to be something, otherwise in 5 years' time, we'll come back and say we had a great resolution. Remember, I read you 1963 and asked, is this constructive insanity or just consistency?
Except that the 1963 thing, it wasn't us, it was a different body of people. I mean, if the unions meet again in 40 years, then it's insanity, by the same issues. Yes, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know whether the presenter came up with the preamble, because I think apart from saying the meeting took place in Kigali, we also need to capture the discussion that took place. And if I remember well, in all the key discussions, include the thematic areas, plus also the panel sessions, I think the experience of Rwanda across the board, be it on citizen participation, women and the issues of vulnerable groups, the issue of peace and security, and also accountability. And if I heard well from the team, I think they appreciated the experience. And there was also a call to learn from each other as a continent, the best practices. So I think the issue of best practices should be captured, whether it's in Rwanda, whether it is in South Africa or where, but I think this should be captured. The other issue that came up strongly was the issue of citizen-centered, people-centered. In your mobilization as trade union on the issue of mobilizing Africans for Africa's transformation, people-centered as a key message, it has to come out clearly. And finally, it's on the issue of democracy and governance. Again, although democracy and governance are universal principles, but the issue of context-based as Africans should also be captured, because every country has its own challenges, its own historical background. So I think, yes, universal, but also context-based has also to be captured. So these are some of the issues. I think it's a question of emphasis. Everything is captured, but we need to emphasize on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think the preamble will take account of the range of discussions, but they are going to be just very summary. What I pointed out is that the main report is the one that will deal with all these issues in some considerable detail. And as I said, we will share a draft that before we finalize that report. But for now, we are focusing more on the recommendations. But of course, before you come to recommendations, you need to indicate the range of discussions that led you to that, and also the exchange of experiences that was involved. So due note is taken of that contribution. Yes, Areski.
Oui, merci, Président. Je veux juste soumettre à l'assistance d'adopter le principe d'une motion de remerciement pour le Conseil rwandais de la gouvernance et aussi le gouvernement rwandais. Voilà. Je dis, je soumets à une proposition, c'est l'adoption du principe d'une motion de remerciement pour le Conseil rwandais de la gouvernance et aussi pour le gouvernement du Rwanda.
I think that goes without saying, but that comes at the end when we get to the closing. Yeah. Okay. Any other on the recommendations? Okay, so thank you very much. I think with the comments which we will seek to embody, we'll adopt this as the recommendations coming from this meeting. If the House agrees, can I see some acclamation, please? We now move to the final stage of our meeting, and it is my pleasure to invite the Honorable Minister Judith to address us. Honorable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable State Minister, Advisor in Social Affairs of Senegal, the Secretary General of Trade Union Confederation for Africa, the Secretary General of Organization of African Trade Union Unity, the Secretary General of CESFRAR, the Chief Executive Officer of Rwanda Governance Board, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Bon après-midi. Hamjambo. Mwiriwe. Mwiriwe. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon as we conclude this historical Pan-African Trade Union International Conference on Democracy and Governance, which I believe successfully deliberated on the imperatives of mobilizing Africans from different countries for Africa's transformation. I take this opportunity to thank the Pan-African Trade Union movement, represented here by the Organization of African Trade Union Unity and the Trade Union Confederation for Africa. I also thank very much the Rwanda Governance Board and other stakeholders for your role played making this conference a fruitful one. Your shared commitment and passionate participation has made this conference in Kigali a resounding success, and I would like to thank you very much for that. Secondly, I would like to thank the organizers for the well-crafted topics that have addressed the experiences and best practices, key challenges, and questions in democracy and governance towards Africa's transformation. Estimated delegates, ladies and gentlemen, despite the fact that many African countries gained their independence 5 decades ago, and various efforts have been made or have been deployed to transform the continent politically and economically, several questions remain with limited answers. I hope this conference has made the right assessment of the true causes of disparities, mismanagement of resources, corruption, and insecurity. I also hope that the conference has outlined informed recommendations for implementation that will deliver sustainable development and transformation. In spite of unfortunate colonial legacy imposed on Africans, it is highly time we found workable solutions to the challenges that we Africans face. I have no doubt that the Pan-African Trade Union movement is a good mechanism to resolve some problems of the Africans and should reinforce homegrown solutions and have authority to implement them. I hope that the Pan-African Trade Union movement will continue to play a paramount role, ensuring that constructive social dialogue remains a hallmark of labor governance and the workers' and employers' relationship in Africa, with the ultimate aim of presenting harmony while sustaining socioeconomic transformation that Africa gains progressively. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to recognize that as Africans, we have many differences and different geographical and cultural boundaries. But what unites us as Africans highly supersedes any kind and number of differences. Africa must continue to safeguard and negotiate its strategic interests in the effort to transform itself by upholding a participatory democracy, effective electoral management, and build a stable peace and security. Distinguished guests, I wish to agree with the resolutions of this conference, especially on citizen participation as an indispensable governance tool that must be respected and promoted. However, like democracy, it is not a single uniform concept, but rather one that needs to be adapted and tailored to each particular context and situation. His Excellency Paul Kagame, our president, said at the first Males Zenawi Symposium on Development, hosted here in Kigali on 21st August 2015, I quote, "You cannot make sense of the development gains that have been recorded in parts of our continent without understanding how deeply our citizens are involved in governance and accountability." End of quotation. Evidence and Rwanda's own experience indicate that when citizens participate actively in matters that concern them, the rewards become very high in terms of both socioeconomic benefits and stability. I'm also glad that this conference has explored women and youth engagement in governance. The increasing role of women and youth in the national, regional, and global governance is stronger today more than ever before. Democracy and good governance system should lead to effective participation of citizens, but more importantly, put the youth and the women at the forefront. Ladies and gentlemen, I agree with the assertions made by several speakers that transformation is not technocratic. It is political and implies mental transformation. We Africans have the biggest responsibility to find lasting solutions to our own problems, not only of economic transformation, but also of unemployment, peace and security, and prosperity. We must take Africa's transformation in our hands by attaching great value to initiatives generated at home and be willing to commit any amount of resources required to implement them. We Africans must achieve our self-reliance, and one of the strategies we must use is to refer to our traditions, history, culture, and find appropriate solutions to our problems. In this context, the post-genocide aim effort that has been put in place to build our destiny is based on the institutions built on consensus and aimed at recovering independent, citizen-oriented, and the Rwandan-owned socio-political, socio-economic, and socio-cultural institutions. One of the strategies we have used successfully is the introduction of homegrown solutions and best practices for self-reliance and sustainable development of all Rwandans. Estimated guests, I can call upon you to work tirelessly in order to confront current and future barriers to Africa's sustainable progress. We must own our journey and reach for an African dignified living and resolutely fight any tendencies to undermine it. There is no time to waste, of course. We must work together and learn from each other's best practices to make our Africa democratic and stable. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank once again the organizers of this conference, commend the efforts of all of you who made discussions so rich and recommendations worthy of adopting by panelists. With these remarks, I wish to declare this Trade Union Pan-African International Conference on Democracy and Governance officially closed. Also, I wish you safe flights for those traveling back to your homes. And Rwanda is your home if you want to stay. It is our pleasure to make it your home, of course. We thank you very much for your attention.
Before we depart, I want to say that we move the motion to thank the Rwandan government, and we'll write to them accordingly. I'd like, on behalf of the organizers, to say a very big thank you to all who made it possible for us to be able to have this conference, in particular the Rwandan's Governance Board, through you to the government and people of Rwanda. Thank you very much. I acknowledge that as PANAF main organizers, all our partners are here, and we can't say thank you to ourselves, but I think participants in the meeting should acknowledge that our main partners who are here from Sweden, LOTCO, from FGTB, Belgium, and Could Brazil, who were not able to make it, but sent us a note indicating their regret, but expressing their hope that everything went well. All of us would like to acknowledge the contribution of our solidarity partners. Thank you. The interpreters made it possible for us to communicate with each other across languages. And you remember that we took them way beyond the agreed time, and I think would like to acknowledge your great contribution to the success of our deliberations. I think there are many people who always work behind the scenes for these things to happen. You never know them. They are not those who are standing in front of you and making big speeches. But I think all those people who work behind the scenes, like Robert and the rest, Eric's people, not Eric himself, but his people, you know, I think they all deserve thank you. I think that's about it. So thank you very much. And if there are any announcements, I think it's time to make them. Eric, you want to make some announcement?
Thank you very much. No, I just thanks for all, and nice trip for all people. But in our culture, we are not allowed to speak any after the closing. But Honorable Minister, please allow me just to make two announcements. The first is for the people express want to go to visit the Memorial Genocide Memorial. I think after when we go outside, I think the protocol can just the protocol just show you where's the bus. We can go there, but after, don't worry. After the visit of the Memorial Genocide, we will drop any to the different hotel. The second announcement: if there is some people, especially the guests, want to see tomorrow how the Rwanda organize the community walks called in Kinyarwanda Umuganda, because every last Saturday we organize the community walks. If you want to participate, please register there, and tomorrow morning there is some bus come to pick you from the hotel to the place to participate to that walks. That walks, it's from, I think, 8 to, I don't know, maybe the protocol can give you the details of the program, but the important thing is to have the names for who want to participate. It's just in the midday, not up to 12. Honorable Minister, thank you to allow me, and good afternoon. Thank you very much.
So I think that's it. Thank you very much.